Okay. All right. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Julio Godinez, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar, The Journey to Unbreakable DevOps on OpenShift, brought to you by Red Hat Marketplace and Dynatrace. We have a great webinar for you today, but before we get started, I need to go through some housekeeping announcements. Today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any part of the webinar, you will be able to, it will be made available for on-demand viewing. We will be sending out a link to access the webinar on demand, or you can visit devops.com/webinars, and it will be available for you as well. We'd like to hear from you, so please feel free to send in your questions at any time throughout the program by using the Q&A tab. We also encourage discussion by using the chat tab, so let us know your thoughts or just say a quick hello. Finally, stick around until the end because we are doing a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards, so stay tuned to see if you're a winner. Joining me today is Mike Villager, Senior Technical Partner, Partner Manager at Dynatrace. And with that, I'm going to put myself on mute and let you begin.
Right. So hopefully I've resolved my technical difficulties and I'm in the right place now because I heard you, I heard that. My presenter is my presentation is being shared, and hopefully everybody's able to see my title slide as I move through here. So apologies for all of that. Hopefully that extra 9 or 10 minutes allowed everybody to get connected here. Hope everybody's having a great day. And we're going to talk a little bit about building some Unbreakable DevOps practices on top of OpenShift, right? So I'm going to kind of go right into things here, right? So as we think about kind of DevOps as a whole, and as we think about our organizational goals moving forward, we can look at this from a couple of different angles, right? But at the end of the day, what is it that we're trying to do? We're trying to release faster, and we're trying to release more frequently, but we're trying to do that without sacrificing our release quality, right? And you'll see the typical kind of feedback loop slide later on in the deck here today, right? But we have to remember that there is a feedback loop here, right? So by being able to deploy with more quality, we're able to in turn build up organizational trust to be able to release more frequently. And when we talk about releasing faster here, what we mean is, being able to take a new feature into production more quickly, right? And we're able to do that because we're able to better trust the reliability and the overall quality of those systems that we're deploying into production, right? So how do we do these things, right? How do we actually release more frequently without sacrificing our release quality? Right, we're able to do that kind of across 4 different things that we've found in talking with some of our analyst partners and talking with our customers and things like that. We found that obviously I sort of kind of feel like the word automation here is a little bit redundant because I'm not really sure exactly how you could do DevOps without automation, right? But we found that bringing observability across the entire lifecycle. Across, obviously, hopefully folks are doing observability in production, but we want to be able to bring that information earlier into the cycle as well, right? Because we found that there's a lot of, interesting pieces of information that you're going to glean from those techniques, right? And we found that having the automation and the observability is really fundamental to building out these processes, right? And then when we start talking about, DevOps as a whole, right? This tends to get really amplified by taking a platform approach, right? So there's this new idea that's been kind of floating around the last couple of years about treating the platform as product, right? So as you look towards taking something like Dynatrace, and treating that as a product within your organization, taking OpenShift, treating that as a product inside of your organization, and deploying those releases. And tying those things together and taking an overall platform approach to what you're doing in terms of DevOps is going to be super helpful. And then also, trying to eliminate some of the piecemeal approaches that you might have had in terms of, trying to couple a bunch of disparate pieces of tooling in order to accomplish something. Minimizing that is going to decrease the complexity and allow you to accelerate. And then we also talk about augmenting these pipelines and augmenting your deployments with AI ops techniques to ensure that you're bringing events into production, you're bringing the root cause analysis data into the overall DevOps platform, so to speak, to allow things like automated problem remediation and so on, right? And then we also want to take that security information and sort of kind of bridge that together to become that kind of DevSecOps process that has become kind of the latest buzzword around that, right? We like to always say dev something ops, right? And the something part tends to change, or we're biz DevOps or we're biz DevSecOps, right? It's bringing all of this information together to ensure that we have a feedback loop, right? And one of the things that I've always utilized when trying to talk about this is ensuring that there's a lingua franca across all of this, right? We have a common set of language and a common set of tooling here that helps rapidly, kind of accelerate things, right? So, as we look at this, we've got a couple of different, kind of key challenges here, right? So the first challenge that we talk about is speed, right? Any kind of manual process here is going to slow you down, right? It's going to reduce your throughput. It's going to take time away from, actually innovating, right? And when we talk about innovation here, we're talking about like any time you're spent doing something manual, it's preventing you from delivering new features, right? And it's also ripe for error, but we kind of get to that. We get to that next, right? So we want to try and eliminate as much manual toil here as we can, right? So we want to ensure that any of the obviously I would hope that we're all doing unit tests and things like that, but we want to start to expand that to include things like end-to-end tests, performance tests, and things like that, and to include that information in our deployment decisions, right? So by automating as much of this as possible, it eliminates a human having to participate in that process and allows that human to do something else, but you also will eliminate human error, right? So our bad quality software, it's going to create poor experience for our customers, right? And anytime our customer has a poor experience, they might not come back, if we're dealing with shopping carts and things like that. Anytime you have a poor experience, that might be a e-commerce provider that you might not revisit again, right? And then also we have to remember that customers are not only external, we have internal customers as well, right? So just because you're responsible for deploying a given service, and that's a service that's being consumed inside of your organization, that doesn't mean you don't have customers. It's just your customers are internal and not external, right? So we need to ensure that that all of our quality goals are being met, and that our go no go decisions are being effectively automated, so that we can prevent bad software from getting into production. A long time ago, I had this great slide. Looking at a pipeline as a factory. And in that pipeline, somebody was shoveling, something dirt, something that was dirty into that pipeline. And then people were surprised that dirt was coming out the end, right? So you need to ensure that you're not treating DevOps and the associated practices as just a way to deploy bad code more rapidly. You need to ensure that you're baking in quality goals as part of your deployment decisions. So, and as we look towards, kind of the next step then is, so now we've got a bunch of like really awesome pipelines that are doing a bunch of really awesome, test automation, quality validation, all of these different things. We need to ensure that, that this is not a lot of custom work that's really difficult to reproduce. Right, we want to ensure that there's as much, platform tooling as possible that allows you to reproduce these things across multiple projects. Right, so a lot of that custom tooling, whether it be Bash scripts or whatever, a lot of those things are really great and possible for like this lighthouse beacon project. Right, but as you look towards reproducing that across 10, 20, 100, 200 projects, it becomes a lot of kind of unnecessary toil, right? Now, obviously, I'm here from Dynatrace, so I'm here to talk to you about, what Dynatrace is able to do around this, right? We're looking at addressing the speed, quality, and scale seamlessly as kind of a platform solution, right? So, we're looking to increase the speed of your app delivery by 75%, right? And that's a real figure that we've gleaned by working with our analyst partners as well as our customers that have implemented these things. We're doing this by eliminating our toil through as much automation and orchestration as possible. We're improving quality, right, by increasing. I actually kind of got myself all cross-tied there, right? So what we're looking to do here is we're looking to take our service level objectives and shift that same kind of technique that you might be using to validate production stability, taking those same objectives and moving those earlier in your pipeline to ensure that you're validating those things automatically in pre-prod or staging or whatever your environment might be, and then taking that same kind of metrics first approach and shifting that right into production to allow you to take those metrics and guide your configuration of things like feature flags, things like taking a blue-green deployment and flipping the switch, doing things like taking a canary release and validating that and then enabling it automatically. That's all focused on improving your quality, right? And then addressing the scale problem by providing a set of kind of common techniques and common configurations that are applicable organization-wide, ensuring that you have self-service models available here, and ensuring, again, as much automation as possible so that you're not, gluing together manual processes, so that you're not, taking a bunch of manual work and trying to replicate that across 100 different pipelines. That's just probably not going to work, right? So, what exactly are we looking to do here, right? So you've got, kind of an existing architecture that might have a bunch of, different tools handling different stages of your pipelines, right? You might have, a bunch of different things. One piece is handling integration, one piece is handling deployment, one piece is handling ensuring the security of the underlying containers. You might have 13 different, metrics providers and things like that. What we're looking to do here is we're looking to take and unify that with the Dynatrace Cloud Automation as kind of being the control plane across all of those different tools, right? You're not looking to take and take and no longer utilize Helm for pushing out Kubernetes charts, or no longer utilize Prometheus for taking metrics out of your Kubernetes cluster. We're looking to take all of that information and bring that in the Dynatrace, and you're looking to have Dynatrace orchestrate as a control plane all of those different tools via some tool commonality, right? Ensuring that that's a event-based control plane that kind of guides the whole process. So, when we look at, again, I mentioned before that you're going to see a lot of that feedback loop, right? You have this feedback loop here where your observability information is driving higher reliability across the organization, and then that feeds back in to allowing you to innovate quicker, right? So as you have a better understanding of of how your releases are going to operate, and as you have better understanding of how you're able to operate the underlying platform reliably, that in turn allows you to deploy quicker, right? Because you have the ability to detect and identify problems sooner. You have the ability to hopefully detect problems before they even get into production. But if they do get into production, you're able to resolve many of those common problems automatically. All of those things improve your scale. They improve your velocity, and they improve your ability to get a new feature into production, right? So, what is the overall Dynatrace cloud automation stack? right? It's another module of the Dynatrace platform. For those of you that may or may not be familiar, we incepted a lot of this functionality. Oh, geez, I think about 2 years ago. I was actually part of some of those original inception meetings in Austria back before the pandemic, when travel and international travel was a thing. We were all in a room together trying to figure out how do we solve the problem of crazy pipelines with a bunch of different crazy tooling all glued together, right? So what we've done here is taken some of the bits of the Captain Open Source project, and we're operating that for you, and we're bringing the observability and automation and all of this orchestration directly to your pipelines, right? And we're operating that for you, right? And what are we trying to do? We're trying to enable all of these different teams to actually get better software out the door quicker, right? Hopefully that's a well understood goal. Hopefully that's something that everybody's aligned in trying to achieve. I'd like to think we are. And as we look towards some of the use cases here, you got a couple of different ones, right? So when we talk about, what does observability mean within the context of a release? What do we mean by progressive delivery, closed loop remediation? How are we evaluating SLOs, and how does that actually factor into the overall process, right? And then how do we actually inject the evaluation of those SLOs and make that part of our go no go decisions for our releases, right? So when we look at kind of the first thing, right, our release observability, right? How do we understand what it is that we've deployed in our environments, right? So how do we understand which versions do we have out there, which products do we have deployed? It's all about bringing the overall inventory of what we have deployed enterprise-wide and bringing that information into Dynatrace and allowing you to understand at a glance what is out there, right? And then we also look at something like our SLO validation and things like that, right? So when we look at our SLO evaluations in production, right? If you've read the Google SRE book, you know that we have this concept of error budgets, right? And what an error budget is if we have a product or a service that is not operating well, right? We've violated our SLOs at a certain percentage. Anytime we actually do a new deployment, that's chipping away at our error budget, right? Because you might have some downtime there associated with making that release, right? And one of the founding principles of SRE is ensuring that you're tracking that error budget so that folks know overall the impact of performance and availability problems on the overall project velocity, right? Because you have to ensure that you're not just burning all of your engineering team out, constantly churning away at resolving problems. We need to ensure that we're releasing properly qualified software into production and not just causing all of our engineers to hate their life, right? How do we meet 100% of our SLAs, right? How do we actually get to that next step? And again, the idea here is that we're attempting to automate some of those go no go decisions, because we're trying to do away with that concept of like a change management board or something like that, right? In these new principles now, we're actually tracking these things with metrics and allowing us to actually, have a number that if we're at, if our SLA is now at 99%, right? Are we going to have any remaining error budget in that 2% to actually in that 0.2% to actually do a deployment? All right. And again, we want to take a look at those SLOs and bring those earlier in the life cycle, right? So this is something that I've been talking about personally for a very, very long time now, is implementing quality gates in your pipelines. So what does this mean? Well, hopefully we're all pretty familiar with continuous integration, the concept of unit tests, right? And if we have a unit test and that unit test has failed, hopefully we're using that as some sort of guidance for whether or not we move forward with our deployment pipeline, right? Well, what we're talking about here is we're taking the idea of that integration testing and including performance and availability metrics there, in doing architectural validation. Do the right pieces talk to each other? Are the right number of pieces deployed as part of my Helm chart or what have you? And am I going to be able to automatically detect and remediate performance and availability problems even before we get into production, right? And when it comes to a lot of these things that we're talking about here as part of this overall cloud automation story, I think the quality gates are one of the things that really resonate with me, because historically I've spent a lot of time as part of performance and availability teams and doing performance engineering kind of before a lot of these things were present in the industry. And more often than not, I would receive a release across my desk and be asked to execute a performance test on that release, right? And in my performance engineering, in my performance test environment, that was a subset of production, I would be doing my scripting, right? And even with a single user, I wasn't meeting my performance requirements, right? Like if you have a transaction that takes a second and a half with only a single user executing that transaction, how would you expect that transaction to take 120 milliseconds in production, right? It's very unlikely for that to happen, right? So by bringing those, pieces of data earlier into the life cycle, we're attempting to kind of align the dev and the ops teams around what it is that you're measuring and around the evaluation of those measurements, and ensuring that those measurements are acting as gates, right? Ensuring that we're able to properly detect a poor performing release before it actually gets into production and takes production out, right? So we really want to ensure that that information moves as early into the life cycle as possible, and that we're properly empowered to gate a release based on that information, right? So, having all of those great SLOs in our environment, right? Having all that great observability data, understanding the relationship of, the platform to the application to the platform, and then how the users interact with the application, right? And having some, great information here on what's actually going wrong, we're able to start thinking about closed loop remediation. So I recently did a great talk with a couple of other folks at Red Hat around a interesting idea of taking this information that we're talking about here today, this problem information coming out of Dynatrace, and then working with some of the other pieces of Red Hat's middleware to ensure that we have runbook automation in place. So what this means is that we have historically taken common problems and documented what you do to resolve those problems, right? And if you have something in the runbook, it's a common problem, it has a common solution, why not automate that, right? So we have this concept of runbook automation, right? And you have this concept of rules baked into a rule engine that then in turn results in something like an Ansible something like an Ansible playbook configured to execute when one of these performance or availability problems are detected. Additionally, you can take that same concept and enable and disable feature flags, which kind of brings me into my next slide when I talk about progressive delivery. Right, but the whole idea here is to actually bring all of the tools together in a kind of codified best practices way to ensure that we're able to release higher quality software more rapidly. Right. So what do we mean by progressive delivery in this context? So I kind of gave a little bit of my secret away here, right? When I was talking about, canaries and feature flags and things like that, right? But when we have all of this really great information, understanding how our users are interacting with the system, understanding if our performance or availability is degraded, we have the ability to understand if some of our business metrics are shifting, right? Kind of going back to that e-commerce example. If I have a shopping cart, right, and we've deployed a new release, we've enabled the feature flag, and now all of a sudden shopping cart conversions are dropping, right? So now we're able to take advantage of progressive delivery concepts, right? We're able to take that canary release, and maybe we don't actually take all of the production traffic and send that to the canary release. Maybe we roll back that canary, right? Maybe we're using feature flag tooling, right? So we've got a feature flag that we enabled that maybe changed the UI on the customer side, or maybe it changed a business rule on the back end, right? So we had a feature flag that we toggled on as part of this release. Well, now we're going to take this information and make an automated decision to disable that feature flag, right? Or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe we're actually making an automated decision to enable that feature flag, right? The whole idea here is that these feedback loops are enabling us to have a lot of these decisions that perhaps in the past required a human. We're able to automate a lot of these now, right? So again, a lot of these things are enabled by having this better understanding of what's actually happening across the environment. This is a little bit of an older slide, but I still like to use it because I think it's still kind of important to help us understand how these things look. So we're taking that observability data and we're bringing that across the entire environment, right? So we're taking the same tooling and techniques that we utilize in production, and we're bringing that into pre-prod dev and test as well, right? Or or maybe your organization works the opposite way and you have this tooling in pre-prod but not in prod. We're doing the same thing, right? We're shifting right and bringing that great tooling and information into production, right? Again, having this full stack visibility across the environment is going to allow us to better understand what is happening in our environment across both the platform as well as the applications, right? And that in turn allows us to have a little bit more quality, well, not a little bit more, to have a lot more quality across the applications that we're deploying. And that quality kind of becomes a feedback loop and allows us to deploy things a little bit more rapidly. Well, not, again, I keep saying a little bit. I actually mean a lot more rapidly. And again, the piece that holds this all together is automation top to bottom, right? So we're automating deployment of our monitoring tool. We're automating deployment of our releases. We're automating the enabling and disabling of our feature flags. We're automating our go, no-go decisions on whether we approve a release to move through our pipeline or not. We are bringing events around our deployments into our observability platform, right? So we're bringing our deployment events into Dynatrace, right? Dynatrace knows a deployment is happening. Dynatrace has actually tied that back to the Jira ticket associated with that release. And then if there is some sort of problem, that's actually all that rich deployment metadata is associated with our problem, right? And all of that root cause analysis data then allows us to do some automated execution of, runbooks if we have encountered some sort of problem here, right? And not a lot of mention of OpenShift along the way here, but I'd like to say that having a platform like OpenShift under the covers here allows us to do things like have an operator in place that is automating the lifecycle of the one agent, right? By having an agent being managed as part of the underlying platform itself helps us, kind of going back to this previous slide, having that observability strategically there as a feature across the entire environment. In OpenShift, that's being managed for us by the operator, right? So now we've got this platform That platform is managing our workloads. That platform is also managing the deployment of our observability tooling, and it's always there, always on, always a part of the overall platform ecosystem, right? And that includes the full topology in terms of, what application is running where on which, Kubernetes worker node. It includes all of that, rich event metadata, both from a Kubernetes perspective as well as our deployment information that we're hopefully bringing into Dynatrace to help it better understand what's happening. We're also bringing things like logs in and ensuring that we're able to create custom events based on things that might be occurring in our logs. We're also able to understand how the users are interacting with these applications, right? So if I go back here and I look at this slide again, right? When I talk about this overall platform, I'm talking about that platform inclusive of the end users that are interacting with this, right? So we're not just making deployment decisions based on, the simple things like CPU, memory, and disk. We're actually including things like performance metrics. And then as we look towards our situation in production, we're looking at making canary decisions based on real user behavior, right? Because we understand what's happening all the way from the end user through the processes down to the worker nodes and everything in between, right? So I kind of going back and forth here a little bit, but hopefully it's not too distracting, right? So as we look at, a real world example here, we've had a situation with a authentication service, right? So in this authentication service kind of had a death by paper cut situation where we deployed a bad release. This release actually included a significant number of increased database statements, and by including that information as a quality gate in our release, you're able to actually make that go no go decision and ensure that bad code doesn't move forward to make it into production. This is actually not Kroger's example, right? But Kroger is an example of an organization that has seen a lot of really great positive results here. And you got a great quote there from Jay. Jay will probably be speaking at our user conference again in February of this year, but he had a lot of really kind of great, interesting things to say about how he was able to take these techniques and utilize them to bring forward better code quality and production over at Kroger, right? And I like to kind of close things off with a few more pieces of information, right? Because we all like numbers and how they actually how this interesting information is really helping us move forward here. And in working with some of our customers and some of our analyst partners, we found that by taking advantage of a lot of the techniques here, things like quality gates and runbook automation and automated SLO validation and so on, one of our customers was able to have 75% fewer production incidents, right? And by understanding what is happening earlier in the life cycle, that helps them to better operate the production environment, right? And by detecting those regressions a lot earlier, they're able to ensure that software that's making it into production has significantly higher levels of quality, right? As we look at some of the time metrics that we track here, again, when I was speaking earlier, when I was talking about how do we release faster, right? Well, what does releasing faster mean? In this case, we had a customer that was able to deploy to reduce the lead time from a new feature making it into production. We were able to reduce that by 97%, right? So that basically means instead of taking, I'm going to try and do math off the top of my head here, but like instead of it taking 100 hours for a new feature to make it into production, it was now 3 hours, right? And that's done by implementing as much automation as possible into these life cycles, right? And then when we start talking about doing releases more frequently, right? So moving from 12 releases a year to 26 releases a year, that's actually a Dynatrace figure, right? And that is big bang releases. That's major releases. That's like a full dot, right? That's not just a point release, right? And we're able to do that by automating as much operations as possible, right? So we've done away almost entirely with the operations team. We now have what we call our ACE team, Autonomous Cloud Enablement, right? And those folks are able to be successful because we've automated as much of our operational decisions as possible, right? So because we're able to, again, take those common problems, those things that might be in a run book, right? Your operations team has that binder of if this, then that, right? Well, if this, then that sounds like programming logic to me. So why not take that same knowledge, codify that, and allow the system to actually do that for you automatically, right? Got a little discombobulated here today by starting these things off a little bit with some of my technical difficulties in the beginning. And I think that has caused me to kind of blast through a lot of this information pretty quickly. I want to take an opportunity here to ask some questions, but I need to figure out how to kind of pause this and move over to here into the big marker screen. Okay, so everybody's seeing that. All right. So yes, I'm Mike Villager at Dynatrace. I was actually doing the talking, and I welcome any kind of questions here. I'd love to know, if you have something, maybe even something crazy specific, like, how does this interact with tool XYZ or what have you, or if you have any questions about the open source side of things here with our Captain project. And I'd actually like a kind of an opportunity here. I'm going to see if I can figure out the poll tool, and I'm going to create a new poll, and I'm going to say, have you heard of the Captain project? Right? And those two choices will be yes, and that will be no. And I'm going to present this poll. I'm going to start polling. This is actually a really cool platform. So I just created a poll on the fly. That's pretty fancy. But I'm actually really curious to see if folks that are on the webinar here today have actually heard of the Captain project. So we've got a couple of no's, right? So folks can actually read more about Captain at captain.sh, and it's spelled like it is there in the poll, KEPTN, because in today's cloud native world, we have to actually spell everything phonetically, and we can't just use the real name. That's kind of a cheeky answer, but I know that's kind of where we're at with things. And the idea here is why the name Captain? Well, the captain is kind of the captain of your overall kind of deployment orchestration, right? So the captain is guiding everything that's happening in your environment, and it's been a fascinating project to kind of see go through the paces here. And it's actually really cool because I think the Captain team actually announced a new version of a GitLab integration today, and GitLab is I actually really like GitLab a lot. And GitLab recently released a OpenShift operator to allow you to operate GitLab on OpenShift, and they also recently went public today. So congratulations to the GitLab team. I actually did a hands-on training day for Dynatrace customers trying to utilize Dynatrace and GitLab together a couple of years ago. So it's kind of a neat conflux of all those things today. Very topical. All right. So it looks like we're 50-50. Some people have heard about it. Some people haven't. I definitely recommend that if you haven't, please head over to captain.sh and take a look at what they're doing. And obviously, a lot of what I talked to you about today was part of the Dynatrace Cloud Automation Platform, which is, effectively the commercialized version of some of the things that we're incepting as part of the Captain project. All right. Anything else in chat? welcome any other questions. We're trying to think of another poll here. So I'm gonna try and make this fun here, and I like polls. I actually like that I can actually create a new poll right off the top of my head, or just think of something and throw it out there to you folks right off the bat. And I'm gonna add a new one. Are you running in production today? And I feel like it would be nice if I could actually do a yes no a lot quicker, but let's do another one. I got a new poll. So are you running OpenShift in production today? Yes or no? All right. The answers are flowing in. I'm seeing a lot of yeses. And I think we're gonna have one of those interesting days where we have our statistics in such a way that we end up being almost perfectly balanced. So and again, like I actually really like this polling function. I'm going to be perfectly honest here. It's like if we were all together in the real world and like we were at a conference, these things that I could like ask for a show of hands, right? And it would be nice and easy. But all right. I find this one interesting. Hopefully folks can actually see multiple polls at once and answer them at multiple times. So I'm actually curious now, and this is something that's helping me personally as I guide myself through some of this content in the future. But I'm curious how many folks that are on this webinar today are familiar with the Kubernetes operator. Like, what is the idea of a Kubernetes operator? What is it for? What does it do? I don't necessarily mean if you've built one or not, but I'm just kind of curious if you understand what they are. I'm actually going to stop my sharing and then I can actually just concentrate on my big marker screen. Right. So I see a lot of yeses, which is really cool. So that's really awesome. For those of you that perhaps aren't familiar with the Kubernetes operator, I really want to take a couple of minutes to talk about why is it really cool to have an operator, right? So what an operator is really doing is it's a bunch of Golang, right? It's a bunch of Golang that's actually codifying all of the organizational knowledge that you might have around deploying and operating a given set of tooling on top of Kubernetes, right? So I mentioned before, here at Dynatrace, we've actually got two operators. In the old days, we had the Dynatrace one agent operator, which was responsible for rolling the one agent out to your Kubernetes worker nodes, right? And now we have the new Dynatrace operator. The new Dynatrace operator is responsible for still deploying the one agent, but it's also deploying an active gate and it's helping to configure the scraping of information from Kubernetes itself and running that active gate on top of Kubernetes. So it's actually doing a lot more than what the old one did. Also, our new operator can do our webhook based one agent injection, which is a little bit different, right? And then I mentioned before, obviously GitLab is kind of in the news today. GitLab released an operator for their on-prem, version of GitLab. And again, what's really cool about all these operators and why I'm hoping that everybody, makes operators in the future, it's really basically you roll the operator out, you deploy the operator in your environment, you create your custom resource definition, right? And then code is responsible for the care and feeding of that solution across your Kubernetes cluster. So you don't really have to think about it again. It's just there doing what it needs to do. For the example of Dynatrace, we've now woven, our Dynatrace monitoring and observability capabilities across the entire fabric of your platform. I think it's a really cool concept here at Dynatrace. We've been kind of part of that process since the get-go, and I think it's a really neat thing that Red Hat has been, kind of championing from the get-go, right? And then obviously, then you could also think of some of the capabilities of OpenShift, like the OpenShift, the OLM, right? The lifecycle manager, as kind of being I like to think of that almost as a, the Red Hat people might disagree with me, but I like to think of that as like an operator of operators, so they can help manage the versions of the operator that are deployed. So perfect. Awesome. All right. So we've got about 6 minutes to go, and I've been kind of coming up with my own questions and then answering them via polls. I would really love for somebody to ask me a question. Anyone? So let's pretend that that we're all together, and we're at a real in-person conference or something like that. So don't be shy. I think if you want, I believe you can also you might be able to message me directly, and then I'll anonymize who it was that asked. But I would say in the next couple of minutes or so here, if we don't have a question, I think we're just about done.
It does look that way. Mike, thank you very much. Kudos for learning the platform on the go. The polls were really great.
Yeah, well, apologies to everybody for being a little delayed getting in here. Sorry about that. I think I actually might have either had or clicked the wrong link. But once I was able to get into that, it worked right away. I was able to get started and kind of immediately get into my content. And thanks everybody who clicked on my polls. I really appreciate it. That's actually really interesting information to me that I'm actually going to screenshot the poll answers, and thank you for that. I appreciate that to everybody who clicked on my polls.
Right. And just as a reminder for our attendees that today's webinar has been recorded. So if you missed any or all of the webinar, you will be able to watch it again. We will be sending an email with a link to access the webinar on demand. The webinar will also be available on DevOps.com. Just look in the on-demand section in the webinars page, and it should be there. Our 4 $25 Amazon gift card winners for today are Tim S. Congratulations, Tim. Our second winner is Martin D. Congratulations, Martin. Our third winner is Paul P. And our final winner is Jan M. So congratulations to all our winners. We'll be reaching out via email with instructions for claiming your Amazon gift card. So please check your inbox. And if you don't see it there, check your spam folder. Mike, thanks again for taking the time to put this presentation together. It was very, very good given the circumstances. So thank you.
No problem. Happy to be here. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to talk over you, but I actually put my contact information out there in the chat. So you can email me, michael.villager@dynatrace.com, or hit me up on Twitter @MikeVillager.
Excellent. Thanks again. And I'd also like to thank the audience for their time and engagement. This has been Julio Godinez signing off for now. Be well.
Thanks, everybody.